Hello, everyone. We'll get ready, or we'll get started in just a few moments. Give some people some time to sign on. All right, we've got a nice group of people, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming and welcome to today's webinar, Spotlight on Neurodiversity. I'm Amanda Rogers, Communications and Engagement Manager and DEI/BA Liaison at BioOne, and I also serve on SSP's DEIA committee. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items to review. Attendee microphones have been muted automatically. Please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to enter questions for the moderator and panelists. You can also use the chat feature to communicate directly with other participants and organizers. Closed captions have been enabled. You can view captions by selecting the More option on your screen and choosing Show Captions in the drop-down menu. This 1-hour session will be recorded and available to all following today's event on the C4Disc YouTube channel in the next few days. And a quick note on code of conduct and today's meeting, we are dedicated to creating a harassment-free community for everyone, regardless of gender, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, religion, or lack thereof, or other group status. C4Disc will not tolerate harassment of or by members or guests of the community in any form. In this webinar, we will be discussing themes that touch upon issues of marginalization, ableism, misogyny, and mental health. This is a space that fosters understanding, empathy, and respect for the diverse views and experiences that will be shared. As we navigate through these sensitive topics, we are all an important part of creating an environment that encourages openness, mutual respect, and the exchange of ideas. We aim to create a safe space for meaningful dialogue that promotes understanding and collective growth. So to help us all ensure a constructive and inclusive dialogue, please approach this discussion with an open mind and a willingness to listen. Remember that each person brings unique perspectives shaped by their own experiences, and let's strive to understand and empathize with one another. If you choose to share your own experiences or interact in the chat, please do so with sensitivity and awareness. And also be mindful of the language you use to communicate. Use terms that are inclusive and respectful, and avoid language that may harm or marginalize others. Dianndra will go over some neurodivergent specific language in a moment, but first, let's take a minute to go around and have our panelists introduce ourselves. Dianndra, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Dianndra Roberts. I'm the Senior Publishing Coordinator for the Royal College of Psychiatrists. I'm also the DEIA Associate Editor for the Scholarly Kitchen, and I sit on the SSP DIA committee, as well as the Education Subcommittee of that.
All right. Sara, would you like to go next?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Sara Rouhi here from Washington, D.C. I'm the Regional Director, Global Publishing Development for the Americas at PLOS, and a member of the SSP board. So good to see so many familiar folks. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Katy?
Hey everyone, so I'm Katy Alexander and I'm the founder of The Remarkables, which is an educational games and books company, and I'm also the marketing director at OQC.
Thank you. And Emily?
Hi everybody, my name is Emily Banks. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called ENA, and we are a specialist neurodiversity recruitment and training organisation that delivers training, consultancy and recruitment services throughout the globe to organisations looking to attract, recruit and integrate neurodivergent talent into their organisations.
All right, thank you everyone. Now over to Dianndra to go over some neurodivergent and neurodiversity specific language.
Thanks, Amanda. I thought it would be great for us to get into some language before we get into the questions of the session. Next slide, please. So these might be some terms that you may have heard or you might not know very well or have come across in passing. So firstly is neurodivergent. It is an umbrella term that describes the individual whose mind and functioning diverges from dominant societal norms, standards, and expectations. So I will go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. The next is neurodiversity. So this is the diversity of all human minds, acknowledging the different ways that we can all exist, think, act, and function. So this is the collective principle of our interactions as a society, and at least how we think it should be working as a society together. Neurodiverse is a term that has come up a lot lately and is coming up in this session as well. And it is a group or population of people that all have differing neurotypes. So society itself is neurodiverse, but an individual cannot be neurodiverse, as you have your neurotype, not multiple neurotypes. And that goes into the next one of neurotypical. So usually people would say they're neurodivergent or neurotypical. So that is an individual whose functioning sits within the dominant societal norms and practices. So this would be someone who is not neurodivergent in some way. And it's also worth noting at this point that when we say things like on the spectrum, we are specifically speaking of autism. Not everybody who is neurodivergent is on the spectrum. It's an autistic term. And you are also either on the spectrum or you're not, same way you are neurodivergent or you're neurotypical. And that follows with neuronormativity, which is a set of standards and expectations that are upheld by society, which often presents itself in a superior way of being. That is not to say that that is a superior way of being. In my opinion, we need neurodivergent thinking and neurodiversity as a whole to function better as a society. However, it's often that we see marginalized communities, and in this instance, the neurodivergent community, are being oppressed by a system of normativity when striving towards, where they end up having to strive towards what they think is the right way to be, which in this we would say is neuronormativity, which is the word I can barely say at this point. So that also comes with a lot of issues, and we will tackle some of that in our questions later. So next slide, please. So here are two graphs that I like to refer to quite often. They are both by Sunny Jane Wise, who also goes by the Lived Experience Educator on social media and on their website. So I would definitely say check them out if you want some resources from lived experience for yourself or to learn more about neurodivergence. And the first is the neurodivergent umbrella. This is not an exhaustive list of all forms of neurodivergent conditions, but it does cover quite a few that have come up in conversations widely. And for some of us, we fit some categories more than others, and it's like, as in we can have more than one. We could have bipolar and autism. It's not necessarily that you have one and you're stuck in one place. And this can also come with comorbidities in terms of other physical health ailments, as well as being neurodivergent. And again, autism is only what we would consider on the spectrum and not the rest of these conditions. And the second is a flowchart, which I think is really helpful for people to understand when they are using the term neurodiverse and whether they're using it correctly or not. As I said before, an individual is not neurodiverse, they are neurodivergent, and saying neurodivergent is not a bad thing. So just ensure you're using it correctly. And I will now hand over to Emily.
Lovely. Can we go to the next slide? Brilliant. So today we are going to be going into this in much more detail, but just to get us sort of thinking about the sort of practical ways we can support neurodivergent people, I've just created a very sort of simple list, which I believe are the sort of key things we can do, regardless if you're a manager, if you're an employee, if you're an intern, apprentice, to really support neurodivergent people and promote sort of the neurodiversity movement within your organisations. Firstly, the number one thing you can do is just make neurodiversity a common conversation in your organisation. please just talk about it. The best way we can reduce the sort of stigma associated with neurodivergent conditions and talking about neurodiversity is simply by approaching that conversation and having it. A lot of people in this space, when we think about neurodiversity, a lot of people can almost shy away from the conversation a little bit with a fear of sort of getting something wrong or saying the wrong thing. A lot of neurodivergent people, including myself, who's got ADHD, we'd rather you sort of try to talk about it than not talk about it at all and avoid the question or avoid the conversation. And the very best way to sort of promote neurodiversity and neuro-inclusion within your organisations is simply just have a conversation about it, be inquisitive, ask open-ended questions, and actively listen to the experiences of your neurodivergent colleagues. Secondly, please have a person-first approach. Again, when we're sort of delivering training to organisations, we often get asked, well, how do I support someone autistic or with ADHD or with dyslexia? And that's an impossible question to ask because every single neurodivergent person will be different. Therefore, it's really, really important to have a person-first approach when we're looking at supporting people. Everybody is different, regardless if you're neurotypical, so without a neurodivergent condition, or whether you're neurodivergent. So please do have a person-first approach in mind where you're looking at supporting that individual and not the condition associated with it. Thirdly, please do consider implementing reasonable adjustments as you legally have to. Obviously, in the UK, we've got the Equality Act. In the US, you've got the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. They effectively have similar clauses in terms of you legally have to support neurodivergent people in the workplace, and that includes implementing reasonable adjustments or reasonable accommodations as we have them in the US. And I will talk about that a little bit in a second as well. Number 4, why you should support neurodivergent people, which I'm sure we'll cover in the conversation, is because it's estimated that 20% of the global population is neurodivergent. So this likely means that 1 in 5 people within your organisation will already have one of these neurodivergent conditions or neurotypes that we're mentioning today. This means that if you've got an organisation that has neurodivergent people in there already, you must make neurodiversity sort of an imperative and a priority within your organisations. If you don't include these people, your organisation will simply get left out and you will miss out on some incredible talents and skill sets, which we're talking about today. So it's really, really important you make it a priority at every stage of your organisation. Lastly, it's fantastic that you've come to this webinar today. It's really, really important that we continue learning about neurodiversity. You continue embedding yourself in things like learning, training of your managers, your employees. The more education you can get about neurodiversity, the more we're going to sort of promote neuro-inclusion in the workplace. So if you can do learning through e-learning, LinkedIn, webinars or some fantastic articles or events, it's really, really important that we create this culture of learning about neurodiversity, both from a sort of educational perspective, but also listening and understanding the experiences of neurodivergent people in the workplace and society. Next one. Oh, do you want the next one or should we just, what do we think? Should we go into adjustments later?
Yeah, whatever works for you.
Yeah, let's go into the questions then. Oh, some questions. Lisa just put, I'll just quickly reply to that one. Does that 20% include those who suspect they are neurodivergent or only those with diagnoses? So only 2% of this group, my 20% group, will have an official diagnosis. So 15% of these people will not know they have one of these sort of neurotypes or conditions. So it's a lot of people that do not yet have a formal diagnosis or may not choose to as well.
Great.
Sorry, Emily, did you want to cover adjustments
I
after
think we'll
the
cover,
Q?
yeah. I think
Cool.
we'll cover it
Okay.
within the conversation.
Cool.
Oh no, we'll cover this in a bit.
Okay, great. So changing it up, let's get into our questions. So I think the first one is, what is your experience of being neurodivergent at work? And Emily, we'll start with you, and everyone can sort of chip in from there. Sorry, Emily, you're on mute. It's all right, we all do it.
We all do it. Thank you. Sorry. So I was actually diagnosed with ADHD this time last year. So I've only actually known I've got ADHD for the past year. As I said previously in my intro, I'm currently the CEO and founder of ENA, where we support neurodivergent people on a day-to-day basis to sort of find fulfilling careers with employers that truly understand and care about neurodiversity as well. However, previously, I did work in corporate banking, which was sort of a very enlightening and sort of eye-opening experience. When I worked there, I couldn't really sit still at work. I'd need movement breaks. I'd become exhausted by mid-afternoon and found out I spent my whole day and my working life just masking. So trying to fit in to a very neurotypical world, and trying to sort of conceal the fact I had these certain traits arising from ADHD. And after a couple of years of that, I just realized this isn't going to work. I'm exhausted. This place is sort of sucking the soul out of me, and I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. I then obviously pursued my passion of sort of starting my own business to help other neurodivergent people. But it made complete sense when I received that diagnosis why I didn't fit into those sort of existing corporate structures. And that's because, like Dianndra was saying a minute ago, a lot of the sort of structures we have in place are based on a very neurotypical way of operating. So things like the 9-to-5 working day, for example, the lack of flexibility, having to commute, having to go into an office. And for many neurodivergent people, this can be completely exhausting day in, day out. So my experience now is fantastic. I think I'm able to be myself. I'm not as exhausted anymore. I can talk freely about what's bothering me. I can work flexibly. So my experience is now I can be my own boss is a very, very, very positive one. Now I've sort of managed my own way and managed myself as well. Who wants to go next? Anybody?
Thanks, Emily. I really do love that for you, that you know, you've just taken it on and said, I'm gonna just control this for myself. And I know for me, I definitely understand how exhausting it is, and masking, and a lot of this is a very new turn for me in terms of understanding what I was striving to wasn't realistic, because what I thought I needed to do was work harder and try harder. And the reality is that I just wasn't working to my needs.
Yeah.
And that it was this sort of neuronormativity, which I'm going to use more often because that is also quite a new word for me. So yeah, I appreciate that. Would anyone else like to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo that. It's exhausting. It's like masking is absolutely exhausting. I think I'm very fortunate in my current role, so my day job. So I work in a quantum computing company, and I have an incredibly supportive manager who just lets me be me, which is, I think, what we all need. I mean, I think every human needs that, but especially kind of considering the masking and the implications, but it wasn't always that way. And I think I really wish that we all worked and lived in an environment where we could openly talk about this. I think there are limitations to what we share because it doesn't always go well, but it would be so constructive for everyone if we could be much more open, or if we had environments in which we could talk about kind of the daily impact at work.
Katy, do you mind elaborating a little more on what your manager does that makes you feel supported? I think that's super helpful if that's not too private to share here.
So he allows me to, well, manage my time, which also I just like, right? I get, as long as, outputs versus FaceTime. He's always there to discuss or go through some of the social interactions I may have missed, or I may not have processed kind of the same way, or if I might have questions about. He's very open about it. I've never been made to feel bad. He actually values the different approach that I might bring, the different way I problem solve. And I've never been made to feel like a child or less than. And I've had very, very few managers who have been able to do that over my last, 20 years. So I think it's a huge kudos to him. I think it says something about just the empathy that people bring to the table, but also how they educate themselves.
Thanks, Katie. And that empathy is such an important one, and having that human first response, and having had a manager who's treated me as an actual person and, put first the idea of like me, what I need as a person to be the best I can be. It just makes such a difference. And then you really do feel like you can tackle anything that is happening and any changes that you need. And, there's no fear of, oh, I have to take this time off, or, oh, I've got a hospital appointment. It's just, we can get through this together because you're genuinely being supported. I would also like to add, just for those who are unsure or don't know where they can get support, that you don't need an official diagnosis to get support in the workplace in the UK. I'm sorry, I can't speak for the US, but I do know in the UK you can still get that support if you don't have an official diagnosis. I just want to put that out there. Sara, Amanda, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Talking about masking it really resonates with me. I've struggled a lot in the past with being in an in-office, in-person kind of environment. I've really learned that remote work is kind of the accommodation that I need to really be able to do my best work. Because office environments can really often create a very high sensory overload for me. And as a high masking neurodivergent, I'm autistic with ADHD. I really felt the need to heavily mask myself in an office setting. And masking is meaning, I don't know if we've actually covered what masking means, so I'll just say it means that I'm spending a lot of mental energy to suppress or hide behaviors that are very natural to me and normal for a lot of other neurodivergent people. But neurotypicals think that they're weird and they don't always like that you do them. So like I spend a lot of extra mental energy really focusing on performing neurotypical norms. I perform my neurotypicalness to be accepted and taken seriously by my colleagues. And that's a lot of energy spent in the workplace when I really need to spend that energy, doing my job. And I would often just get home from an in-office scenario and be absolutely exhausted, unable to function. I have a 7-year-old kid, so I felt like I couldn't really parent my child when I got home from work, and I didn't like that. And so when the pandemic hit, I actually learned that working remotely works for me. I really thrived in that kind of an environment, aside from the other stressors that the pandemic brought. I really had a good experience with that. And that kind of led me to want to seek a remote opportunity because my work-life balance is just so much better.
Thanks, Amanda. Sara, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges around the kind of neurodivergence that I experience has been when it's incredibly helpful for your work versus when it sets you back. It's not all, depending again on what neurodivergence any given person is living with. There are aspects of it that can be incredibly helpful in the work context. But conversely, that thing that's usually helpful is usually paired with something that's actually very unhelpful, right? And so when the unhelpful side pops out, that's when you realize you have to mask or you have to, adjust in some way. And so in my experience, that's the helpful piece is what people observe. And then when the unhelpful piece pops out, you find yourself having an experience of like making excuses for it, trying to hide it, that kind of thing. And that can be, like you said, exhausting, challenging, particularly if you're trying to engage with a manager without sharing the details of the neurodivergence, right? You don't want to share too much information, but at the same time, you're like, I need you to acknowledge I work a different way. And so some of the ways that I've been trying to proactively model that at PLOS, for example, is like I try to take, you guys have been subject to this. I try to take like a lot of walking meetings, like getting away from my desk and being outside and stuff is very, very sort of essential for my wellness around how I work. And so very often I will be walking outside instead of taking a meeting at my desk. There's little things like that can begin to show other ways of working that are not typical, but have no negative impact and in fact have a lot of positive impact. And those sorts of things I think can be helpful to sort of realizing that, oh, I can free myself from some of these strictures that are very neurotypical and very peer pressure sort of based as well.
Thank you. I think that leads us quite nicely into our next question, which is how do you think neurodiversity brings value to the industry? And do we need to prove our value? Which comes up a lot. Katy's smiling. Katy, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, my favorite question. So I think fundamentally it's okay to ask how anyone contributes to a business, right? We should be asking everyone, regardless of any difference. But I think we all know it's been spoken of huge amounts. You see it in the news, you see it online. I think everyone knows what neurodiversity provides. It provides that different perspective on problem solving, a different way of working. It's got huge benefits for the business, actually society more broadly, I would say. But I can't help but ask myself, maybe we should ask the people, the neurotypicals out there, what you guys bring to the table, right? Like if I'm going to sit up here and be asked my value, what's your value? And not to be glib, but on balance, I'm able to see the big picture, sometimes much more quickly, and I have to wait months for others to catch up. So where are you holding back the organization? And I think, not trying to stir the pot, but I think I'm trying to make the point is that this isn't the current conversation I think we all want to be having. I think we need to think more about how an environment can be created where people who think differently feel empowered to talk about it, talk about their differences on a daily basis, what they bring to the table. Because currently, I think this type of framing and these kind of questions where we get up and we have to prove our value every single time we're on a panel, why would I disclose, right? Given this conversation, this very question, there's only downside for me because I'm put in a position where I have to say why I bring value, even though, I've got 20 years experience. So I think for me, it's up to all of us to create an environment where disclosing isn't harmful and we can create an environment for everybody, right? This doesn't have to be just because I think a certain way. It benefits everyone. So.
And if that's hard to map, I think another way of thinking about this is, would you ask like, hey, women,
Exactly.
can you demonstrate? Right?
I didn't go there, but it was exactly what I was thinking.
Person, right? Hey, like, can you demonstrate what you, right? Like you wouldn't sort of do that. So this is no different from that, but that's such a great framing, Katy. Thanks for sharing that.
I think that's interesting because I do get asked that as a Black woman, and someone will be crying, it's not about race, but it is for me. I'm a Black woman and I do get asked that. And then you add I have accessible needs and, reasonable adjustments and requirements and things. And then it's this cry of, well, what do we do? Like, how is she going to work here? And it's like, okay, well, have you considered that you took my application, you gave me an interview, you wanted to hear more. So obviously I've done the work and I'm proving myself in that way. So I think sometimes there's so much fear of something or someone being different that it completely overlooks the fact that this person is in the room because they deserve to be in the room. And you shouldn't be questioning that because they don't look like you or they're not, set up in the way you're set up, and just take that fear out of yourself. And if you find yourself having those questions of where's like the quality and well, what are they going to bring to the table? Well, they're at the table with you, so they're already bringing something, and that needs to be some introspection as to why that's your go-to. So
Yeah, because I
that's
think
my 2 pence.
it devalues us, right?
Yeah.
Like, disability or not, why do we need to prove value? Like in a business, everybody has to prove value. Why is it because we think differently that we're singled out to, come on webinars, go to panels, and have to demonstrate why we bring value? Like we all have to. So I think it's a framing over the years. We're not going to progress. We're not going to progress if we're
all about, right? I mean, the reason we're asked to define that is because we're harder to deal with, right? The expectation is you're more work, right? If I have to accommodate you in some way as a man, like to say I'm a manager with a neurodivergent employee, like that means I have to change how I engage with you. That means I have to ask.
You have to be a better manager.
You have to be a better manager, right? You have to be a better manager. You have to understand, and that's more work. So if Katy, you're gonna ask the question, why do we have to answer that? I think because the implicit thing in whoever's engaging with it is, oh, this seems like more work.
But
Whether it's
often,
I need
yeah.
a different keyboard for you because you have wrist problems and you need a different ergonomic piece of support, or you have a different way of processing information, and so I need to make sure the organization is making it available in that way, right? These are all, I mean, Dianndra, I think you had a really nice example of some of these very concrete accommodations that like are very obvious. So sorry, it's just to throw a grenade.
No, that's fine.
No,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm always going on a rant about it. Sorry, Katy, did you want to?
Yeah, I just can say I completely agree with that, and I think it's a cop-out. And a cop-out at an individual level, but also an organizational level, because if you want your organization to be stronger, more productive, ready for the future, like let's face it, AI is coming and neurotypicals are going to perform less. Like the research is coming out. Like if you want your business to perform, train your managers to be better people and to be better managers, or don't make them managers, right? Not everyone should just be a manager because they've got, X years under their belts. Like actually train managers. Yeah, sorry, it's one of my pet peeves, so I should just
No, I agree, and people complaining about reasonable adjustments is one of my pet peeves. And I think anyone, and I know Emily's laughing because I went on a massive rant the last time we were on a panel together. So yeah, it's again, yes, managers need to do better if that is the case. If it's a matter of saying, oh well, it's more work, then so and it's probably not. It's also part of what you're meant to be doing, and reasonable adjustments are just that. They're reasonable. My glasses are a reasonable adjustment. We're not going to give them to everybody because not everybody needs glasses to see. If we made everybody wear glasses, then some people actually will not be able to see. So why are we doing that? As I sit here with all my ergonomic equipment and chair as well to support me, because that's what I need. And I think I said it the other day, I need a step stool in my house because I'm quite short, but I wouldn't give it to my friend who's 6'5" because it doesn't make any sense. They would hit their head on the ceiling. So we just need to support what people actually need to get the best out of them. It's literally equity, which is what a lot of us say we're striving towards. So we can't set the argument of, oh, it's more work, when it's actually just getting everybody to the same opportunity with what they need. Did anyone else want to come in on that, as I ended very strongly?
Oh, I'll just jump in. I think that, what you've been saying has just been right on the nose. And I think really something important that we all need to hear. And I think maybe it was Katy said something about, it makes your organization stronger. And I remember once hearing a metaphor for why diversity of all kinds is important. I was in a podcast and I wish I could remember so I could appropriately cite it, but I don't remember the podcast. I just remember the metaphor with how much it resonated with me. And it was asking the question of, where do you keep your ketchup? Some people keep their ketchup in a cabinet, some people keep their ketchup in a refrigerator. What happens if you have a big old plate of French fries and you run out of ketchup? For an American, this is a tragedy. I don't know about for you folks in the UK if that's quite the same tragedy, but it's the worst thing that could happen is to run out of ketchup. And what do you do? How do you solve that problem? Well, somebody who keeps their ketchup in the refrigerator might grab mayonnaise or mustard. That's what I would do. Somebody that keeps their ketchup in the cabinet might grab like seasoning salt or malt vinegar. And that's a metaphor for when you come at things from a different perspective, you bring in different ideas. I would never think to put vinegar on my French fries, but that's a potentially delicious option. And that I think is just the overall benefit of when you have a lot of different viewpoints, a lot of different experiences and backgrounds coming into an organization. They bring with them all of these new and different ways of thinking. And I think that this is an area where neurodivergents really excel. There's different ways of thinking. We often will kind of question the structures that are already in place. It kind of gives us a bad rap sometimes of like, I've been told that I have a problem with authority in the past, and I'm like, and I just think, no, I don't have a problem with authority. I just ask questions when things don't make sense to me. And when I think you have people that are actively thinking about existing structures, potential new ideas and structures, it just brings a lot of life into an organization in the best possible way.
Thanks, Amanda. Emily, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just very quickly, I think the French fries one is so funny because in the UK we shove everything on chips. We've got salt, we've got vinegar, we've got pepper, we've got all the different sauces. So it's just really funny to hear the difference. But there's this really nice theory called like the curb cut effect, which you might have heard about before. But I think it's something which I think is really easy for people that maybe not in the space to understand why we do the things we do in terms of inclusivity. And I can probably find a link which I can pop in the chat box as well. But it's relating to like inclusion. And say if you cut the end of the curb, so you remove a section so it rolls quite nicely onto the road. For someone with a wheelchair, you actually do benefit everybody. So if we think of delivery drivers, think of women with babies, for example, or toddlers, and we think of cyclists, by making that small change, you really can benefit everybody. So a lot of these things we're talking about today, I know Dianndra talks about the special treatment and all that sort of stuff. A lot of these small changes can make the workplace a lot more inclusive for every single person. So yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get Dianndra to start a rant now about the special treatment, but I'll pop a link in the chat box, but it's a really, really nice way of sort of explaining inclusion as well.
Thanks, Emily. And yes, I do agree. I do think the majority of these adjustments do actually help everybody. It's when people, again, it goes back to that fear of, well, why are they getting something I'm not getting? It's like, well, even in that instance, you might not need it. And if you do, you will then start to receive it as well. So there's no, like, everybody wins if we all actually just be inclusive. Strange time saying that still in 2024, but here we are. So our next question is, how has your neurodivergence influenced your career journey and interactions with colleagues? So Sarah, I'm going to start with you on that one.
In the positive sense, it's been really helpful because it manifests for me as a lot of energy. And so colleagues will find me energizing. I'll bring kind of excitement, energy to a new project, a new effort, a new way of approaching a problem. And folks will come away feeling energized and excited as well. And that's a nice byproduct of that. The sort of downside of that is when something doesn't work out, the flip side for me will be just a real, like, a level of response that is sort of exceeds what the stimulus was. such that, you know, I might need to like log off. I might need to take a walk. There'll be an element of like, I need to disappear for a little while. And so the energy part is generally what most people see, and that's been very positive, and I'm sort of known for that. But definitely the, you know, Sarah's gone dark for a little while is the flip side of it. And you often are having to, you can find ways of explaining around it, but you've got to feel comfortable sharing why that is. And when we were talking about this session, if you pull up the, can you pull up, Dianndra, the umbrella again? And if you can't, don't worry. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the umbrella visual is really nice around the various types of neurodivergence. And if we're honest about it, there's a subset, I think, that have become very, I don't want, socially acceptable might be too strong a word. And for those of you, you know, I could be misstating things, so please correct me if I say anything that's not appropriate. But I think increasingly we're hearing a ton about ADHD, particularly how it manifests in women. Obviously, autism is something we hear a lot about, dyslexia, some of those sorts of things you hear a lot about. But some of these others, you know, if you were to be quite, you know, open with a manager or a team, like, you know, I have schizophrenia, right? I have some of these other ones. It stops being like, oh, that's interesting how we can accommodate it, to, oh, you're mentally ill, right? Like there's a different valence to which of these you're living with. And feeling like you can accommodate one feels like exciting and we're going to support you, and feeling like you can accommodate another one is like, ooh, is this person like going to be a problem because this is a real like serious mental health issue? And so there is a real challenge around deciding which of these you want to disclose, which versus which of these are you comfortable talking about, and then having that piece of, can you work with your manager or your teams to make sure you feel supported. So just flagging that there are, on the spectrum of, and not the spectrum of autism, but on the spectrum of neurodivergent experience, there do feel like there are those that are more socially acceptable and those that are moving into an area that folks can feel like is more than they can handle. And that's something I've been balancing and struggling with myself. But you find, like you said, you find ways of coping with it, but I don't have a good answer for that. I'm just putting it out as something I've experienced.
Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. I think it's really important to just say it as it is. Sometimes it's not necessarily like, oh, this is a positive experience of mine, this is a negative experience, this is my experience. So I really do appreciate you sharing that. And I understand what you mean when you say like the socially acceptable sort of conditions that people are willing to work with. And I think some of that comes with the conversations we're having. And I really do hope these conversations lead us to have more conversations about the further conditions within the neurodivergent umbrella, so that it also becomes the norm, because I think that's sort of, from my humble opinion, is what's happening. And not to bring up everybody being scared again, but it is a lot of people don't know, so naturally it's like, oh well, I don't want to deal with that, or that's got all these connotations, and I'm not actually going to go into these media representations of certain conditions that are super harmful and not realistic at all, just for the sake of having a villain somewhere with, you know, TV and such. So does anyone else want to add to how this has influenced their career?
I think I will. So I think on a personal level, I think it's made me much more empathetic. So, and this is maybe where you get differences between, or perceived differences, right, between what is spectrum and how it actually manifests. Deeply empathetic and understanding that everyone has struggles that we cannot see, right? Because you live it, right? You know, when you're masking. But I also think it's influenced my career because I'm a dog with a bone. Like I'm resilient, like I will not let go. I'm resilient, sometimes to my detriment, but very, very I'll keep at it. And I think that's what helped me found the educational games company. Like the aim is to give more role models to children. So they actually see the diverse role models that I never, ever saw. And there comes with that the creativity, the tenacity, I don't think I would have that otherwise. So it's such a double-edged sword because you have to live with people kind of often seeing you as so much less than, alongside these beautiful kind of outcomes that you can see in yourself. And it's sometimes it's an odd mix.
Sorry, I'm struggling to unmute myself there. Thank you, Katie. And does anyone else want to come in? A point. I will say one thing, which I think is important. I think if you know, you know, but it's one of those things people don't really think of. What I've noticed on this journey for me is the misunderstandings I have in social spaces, especially at work, in terms of like my tone and my facial expression not necessarily matching all the time. And I might say something and someone's like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, no, I was actually really happy when I said that. And but my face might not have been. And I've been in meetings where people have like laughed at how my face sits in a certain way and how it could just be like very flat, or how I could have like a flat affect to my voice. And I'm very aware of that. So I do try and bring up the tone when I'm speaking to other people, which again is a form of masking and can be quite exhausting. And that's really followed me through my career. And I just thought, or maybe I'm just like some naturally deadpan person because I don't hear it and I don't understand what people are saying. But I think that's something a lot of us have to navigate in life, society, the working world. And yeah, I just wanted to raise that point because we all talk about it amongst each other, but I don't think it's something we necessarily talk about with other people who aren't experiencing it. Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, that just makes me think a lot of, my own experiences. Being late diagnosed, I just always thought that there was something wrong with me. Why couldn't I seem to communicate the way that people were expecting me to, or give them what I thought they wanted in interaction? And I just always thought that, oh, I'm just built wrong. I just don't understand these things that just seem to come so naturally to other people, but just, for some reason it just escapes me. Like, why can't I interact and be like everybody else? And then for me, in college, I actually found the communication department, and hyper focused. I went real deep into the communication department because for me, I thought, here are rules that I can learn. Finally, I can maybe learn to connect with people in this way that I just don't seem to understand how to. And this was all before being diagnosed. So looking back now, I'm like, this makes a lot of sense why I really dove deep into that department and followed that as a career after leaving school. So I really find that my neurodivergence has driven my career every step of the way. In reality, I work in marketing and communications, and I love the work because I get this simultaneous sense of novelty where every day I'm kind of doing something different, but then there's this repetitiveness that, like, it's also the same. Like, I'm writing a social media post. Well, it's a different thing that I'm talking about, but I'm still writing a social media post. And it has fed both of that ADHD and autistic sides of my brain in kind of the best possible ways. I will also say, going back to the whole learning neurotypical norms, it helped me mask more efficiently in a way that even my own family, after I started taking these courses, I had a family member look at me and say, I don't know who you are. I don't recognize you anymore, because I was all of a sudden able to perform neurotypicalness. And that has had a pretty big impact on my mental health. And I'm, recovering from some things like burnout and other mental stressors that, because of that constant need to perform neurotypicalness, or I felt like I needed to. Now I know I don't need to. That it was a little bit of a double-edged sword there.
Thanks, Amanda. I think it would be a good time to go to some of the questions in the Q&A. Please do put your questions in there, and we are also answering them through text as well. So the first question is, as a supervisor, how do I start a conversation with my team about our work environment that includes it says neurodiverse, neurodivergent, and neurotypical persons? Does anyone want to go to that? Emily, not to put you on the spot, but this is your bag.
Yeah. So it's all about universal design, basically. And there's some amazingly interesting things on the internet now about how you can design for different types of people, basically. So when we're looking at putting offices together, obviously you don't want to make it a completely neurotypical office or a neurodivergent office. It's all about sort of creating your workspaces to suit different ways different people work, basically. It's really, really interesting. I think there's so much good stuff on the internet, which I can definitely link, about how you can consider universal design when you're planning office spaces or even like the virtual working environment, because it's all about having different spaces for different people, sort of behaviors and how they work. So places for collaboration, silent spaces, spaces where people can focus or concentrate, where people have meetings. So I'll put some more links in, but if anyone does have anything in particular, but yeah, there's loads of good stuff out there about sort of accommodating and designing for different people.
Thanks, Emily. Does anyone want to add anything to that question or answer to that
I'm sorry,
question?
which question are we on? Apologies.
As someone, no, Lord, it's happening.
Yeah,
I've
because
lost
I'm jumping
myself.
in what's answered, so I messed up.
So as a supervisor, how do I start a question? No, how do I start a conversation? This is neurodivergence in work right now. How do I start a conversation with my team about our work environment that includes neurodivergent and neurotypical persons?
So I will jump in on that if I could. This is an answer I've actually put to a couple of the questions. I think rather than thinking in terms of like, oh, wait, I haven't thought about neurodivergent people and now I need to address that specifically. I think the approach is, have I been thoughtful about alternative ways of working? So without singling people out or asking them like, you had a weird experience, are you neurodivergent? You know, anything like that, you can just say like, I, as a manager, communicate and work this way. It'd be really helpful if folks on the team would be willing to share, how do you communicate? What's the way that's more comfortable for you around communication, around processing information, around receiving feedback, around meeting settings, right? And then if you as a manager get all of that feedback, you're getting it from everyone, and neurotypical people need space to share that stuff as well. You can start to sense like, I don't know, maybe the specifics of what Katy needs, you know, Katy's situation is, and maybe she doesn't feel comfortable telling me, but I do know that she needs these things to work well. And I should be accommodating those things. And it has nothing to do with any label necessarily. Maybe she'll disclose that at some point. But really what I'm trying to do is make everyone feel comfortable sharing how they work best, and then trying to generate a space, you know, within reason that I can do that. My approach.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of time. So our next question is, a lot of neurodivergent people sometimes don't really know know what kind of support they need, or have low confidence levels and are unsure of how to advocate for themselves. Any on how to improve? Can I start this one as somebody who is still figuring this out? One thing I had to do for myself when it was like, oh, this is why you've been struggling. I had to really look into myself and then sort of break down, what have I been doing to survive? And what have I been doing because that's who I am? And you're going to go through this grief and this point of like, my whole life is a lie. It's not. You've just been in this really intense survival mode. And when you start working out of that, you start to figure out what you need. And then you do naturally start advocating for yourself. I start saying things like, actually, I'm going to need more time before this meeting. No, you cannot just send me the agenda as we're going in, especially if this meeting is going to be longer than 30 minutes. I'm going to need to know. Please don't say, hey, I need to talk to you, and then don't follow up with why. I need information. Also, just simple things of me saying, hey, I ask a lot of questions. It's not from a place of judgment. It's because I genuinely need the information to be able to figure out what is happening and just sort of set a structure for myself. So the confidence comes, the advocating does come. It's put yourself first, continue to put yourself first, and keep doing what you need to do for you. And if that means you're no longer doing certain things that you were doing, then that's exactly what it needs to be. Does anyone else want to add to that?
I'd add something from, so if you manage, and as a manager, right, if you've got an employee who is struggling to understand or doesn't have the confidence, do what you would do with any employee, right? When you manage someone, every approach for every employee is different anyway. So help them build their confidence, find the things that they thrive at and kind of encourage it and be empathetic towards it. And, you know, they're going to have to do things on their side to discover what they need to help support them. But you can also help maybe push them in the right direction if you see that something's working better. I'm just conscious of time, so I'll stop.
No, yeah, thanks, Katie. And yes, try new things, try things. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Try the next thing. Just keep trying. And
I'll also just jump in because as another person who's also just, you know, figuring it out as I go along, you know, what works for me, how can I better advocate for myself? Therapy is wonderful. I feel like therapy is another thing that gets like a negative, there's a stigma associated with it, but for me, therapy has been life-changing in the best of ways because there's a person who's kind of a sounding board that I can say, like, am I way off base here? Am I being ridiculous by feeling this way or thinking this way? And so shout out to therapy.
thank you, Amanda. Yeah, that is a good point. Therapy, if you can, it's not always easily accessible, and I do appreciate that. UK wait times are just a mess. So we have 3 minutes left. So I'm going to go to the panel just to ask, what do you want people to do going forward from this session, to take away from this session? And I'll start with myself. Yes, please respect people's requirements, introspect on why you might feel upset by them, and be kind, give people grace. And for those who are on this journey figuring it out, also give yourself grace, be kind to yourself, and you will get there. It's a journey. It's okay. Emily?
I would say keep learning about it, to be honest. I think we've only just touched the very edge of the neurodiversity world today, and there's been some great information. But I think the only way we're going to properly destigmatize neurodiversity, help people feel at ease in our workplaces, create inclusive workplaces, if we just keep learning about it. And I think when you tell someone to start learning about stuff, they're like thinking they're going to have to read books or whatever it may be. But there's so much good stuff out there, from articles, YouTube videos, there's TikToks nowadays, there's LinkedIn posts. So just keeping aware of what's out there. And if you do see things on LinkedIn, for example, just have a quick read of something. It doesn't have to be reading books or novels or anything about neurodiversity. It's more just keep an open mind and keep just expanding your knowledge to help reduce that stigma around talking about neurodiversity in general.
Thank you. Katy?
Yep. I think for me, it's kind of echoing what everyone said, and then a call out for, I hope at the next one of these panels, we see some of you on the audience telling us what you've done in your businesses and what's worked and what hasn't, so that it's not just us telling you what we need, but you coming and showing us that you've heard and you've listened.
Thanks, Katy. Sara?
I think the self-reflection part is really important. You've got to know what you need for yourself before you can advocate for yourself and ask others. So if you feel that, you know, you're existing in this space and you're not getting the support you need, there is a step where you have to sit down and think about, well, what is that support? What do I need to be able to perform well, to be happy in and outside of your job? So if you're feeling like that's vague and unclear, I think the first step is sitting down and thinking about it and writing it down, and being aware.
Thank you. And Amanda?
Yeah, I think, echoing what everyone else has said, I think has been absolutely wonderful. I hope in any small way that, we're reducing the stigmas held around neurodivergent people. And I also hope that people realize that neurotypical communicative norms are neurotypical and not necessarily the only way, that neurodivergent norms are just as valid and just as reasonable as neurotypicalness. And hopefully we can learn that we don't always need to engage in neurotypical norms to do our jobs well and to be productive members of our organizations.
Thank you. That is a lovely one to end on. Thank you all for joining us. It is now time. We hope that you have learned something, felt seen, and valued this experience. Please do complete the evaluation form, which is in the chat. Find us all on LinkedIn. I believe our names are our names on LinkedIn. So just look us up. And yeah, thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. So good to see you as usual. Talk soon.